Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Flora. I am so excited for today. We are going to take a deep dive into the real talk of parenting, mindset, wellness. I am joined by a very special guest, my friend, and your favorite pediatrician, Dr. Mona Amin. Dr. Mona is the founder of PedsDocTalk. She's a pediatrician. She's a mom of two. And she's truly a trusted voice for parents navigating the tricky waters of raising kids in today's world. She has been making large waves in the world of pediatric health, parenting advice, and advocacy. With her evidence-based and compassionate approach, Dr. Mona offers practical tips and focused education that not only empowers patients, but also promotes healthier, happier families. In today's episode, we are going to talk about everything from managing the overwhelm of information that's out there for us parents, how to change our mindset so we're not driving ourselves and our kids crazy, and also touch base on Dr. Mona's personal approach to her mindset shift and overcoming her life hardships. Hi, everyone. You are listening to Beyond, and I'm your host, Dr. Flora. Listen, life is hard. You don't have to do it alone. As a mindset coach, physician, mom, and an infertility warrior, I have mastered techniques to help move you towards contentment and growth. I can't wait to go along with this crazy-ass life journey with you while making sure you feel like your best self. This podcast is meant to have you feel unstuck from your rut and less alone. Let's do this. Mona, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited. We finally made this happen.
I know. What an intro from a friend too. Thank you so much. I know we've been friends online from, social media presence, but then we finally met at Pinnacle last May of 2023 or 2024. And it was wonderful. And I just, love connecting with you and happy to be here today.
Yay. It's crazy how social media connects people. I still am shocked that we just only met in person last year. Isn't that crazy?
I don't want to say this because I have probably friends of mine from like before social media listening, but like it is wild how some of the people I've met on social media have become my closest friends. I have all these friends from before social media, but like maybe it's because of the shared understanding of social and like, it's almost like when you have friends in residency, you go through the hardships and the good and the bad together. And same thing with being creators online and, physician moms and all that. So thank you for sharing that with me and commiserating and celebrating all that we do.
Of course. That's why we're here. So let's get started, Mona. Yeah. There are so many parents out there feeling like they are just floating, just surviving, especially in the early years of parenting. They're constantly exhausted, overwhelmed. They're second guessing themselves because there's just so much information, misinformation out there. Me and you know all about that. Yeah. From your experience, what's the biggest mindset shift that parents can take so they can go from just getting through the day to actually enjoying the parenting journey with all their ups and downs?
I think one of the biggest things to remember is that parenting isn't about getting it perfect. And that's really important for all of us in this modern parenting age when there is so much information and people telling you, your kid must do this, and this is my kid doing this. And remember that learning as you go and learning to let go of control is one of the biggest things that we can do in our personal lives, but also as parents. And social media will try to convince you that there is one right way to do everything. But the best parents in my eyes are the ones that are not following every rule perfectly. They're the ones who are present. They learn to adapt and they're willing to pivot when something isn't going the way they want or isn't working. And a large part of that is tapping into intuition. And sometimes we lose intuition, which I think a lot of parents have when we are listening to too many opinions. There's too much noise. We forget that what is the value that I want to raise my children with? What can I do in this moment rather than listening to 10 different opinions? And when you learn to block out that noise, you really start to remember that I can do this. And I have been in these moments too where me and my husband are trying to figure out what to do in a parenting situation. Not every situation is going to be in a parenting book, right? You can get overarching, like, okay, here's how to handle a tantrum, but are you going to figure out how to handle this certain issue with the certain temperament of a child you have? Not always. So much of the fun of parenting in my eyes and looking at it like this is, what can I do in this moment? I know that I want to raise a child who's loved, but who's not, for example, understands boundaries and is
Yeah.
understanding that we have to do certain things. But how can I make this happen? And sometimes it's trial and error, and know that that is okay. And I always encourage my parents to think and act before they actually ask for help, especially when it comes to parenting. I'm like, think about what you would do first before coming to me, because I want to see what you have thought of, and then we will work on it together, right? And because when you're in that situation, when you're faced with a difficult moment and you learn to handle it, that's how you get better at this parenting thing. You're like,
Absolutely.
look at that, I did it. And now he or she or my daughter, or whatever, my son, is now doing this in a different way. And I did that. And that gives you a little bit more pride and understanding that I can figure this out. And if I can't, I can ask for help, whether it's a pediatrician, a therapist, or
Yes.
whatever it is. You're not alone in this journey, but I want you to just try first.
Yeah.
Just
That's
try
so
first.
funny because
Yeah.
I am giving my 9-year-old similar advice. I'm like, before you ask me for help,
Yeah.
figure it out. If you don't get it right, that is okay. I'm here. Your dad's here. Your teachers, your village is behind you. Don't worry about that. We're not going anywhere, but just try. Like, it's okay to be wrong. And hey, if you are right, imagine that learning curve. Imagine how you're going to adapt in the future. And so I love how we can also apply that to
Totally.
parenting.
Oh, I mean, all of this is like, we have to parent ourselves, this is the
Yeah,
reality, is that we are reparenting ourselves every single day when we
absolutely.
go through these moments, whether it's something we learned from childhood that is not serving us, or maybe something in our adulthood. And
Yeah.
then when you see your little child that's younger than you, but has your face, if they're your genetic blood, like, you're going to look at them and say, wow, how are you so wise? And
Yeah.
it's because of you. Like, remember that you are the one parenting this child, that they are learning these amazing things from you, even when you think that you're failing as a parent. Like, you are doing a wonderful job if they can regurgitate that back to you in your hardest moments, right? Like, mommy, it's okay that you spilled this. I hit my car the other day on the side of our on the side of our garage, and I was so upset. And my son came running and he's like, it's okay, mommy, you made a mistake. We can fix it. Like, when he continues to do that to me when I make mistakes, I'm like, oh man, I'm doing a wonderful job here. Even on days that it's not perfect, it doesn't have to be. And such a beautiful thing.
Our kids are, I hope, on a wonderful path to developing this sense of emotional intelligence that I hope will take them far in life. I think there is, the traditional mindset of like, work hard, get good grades in school, go through
Yeah.
your checklist, but knowing how to learn from mistakes, adapt and pivot is such a beautiful thing, both as kids and as parents in adulting. It's a very specific trait that I think all of us can develop and learn.
Yeah, and it's a skill that will always serve us well. Like, there is no part of resiliency or anything like, adaptability that it's human nature. Like, we need to learn that, but so many times we don't. And especially with parenting, right? We often want to fix for our children. And that's the same concept like you mentioned with your daughter. Like, from a young age, autonomy before intervention is like my
Yeah.
philosophy, right? Like, let's see
Yeah.
what they can do before we intervene. And that goes from my philosophy about sleep. When they're eating a meal, when they're having a meltdown, I don't rush. We're very like calculated in the way that we kind of approach a situation calmly, without sort of, are you okay? Do you need me? Like, it's very,
Hmm.
okay, what have you done? Or when they're frustrated, can you figure out the puzzle on your own? And I think it really does add to their cognitive development also. And it's not just
Absolutely.
parenting, it's developmental. And they learn to be like proud of themselves, which I think is so awesome, that they learn like, yeah, I am capable. And I just want
Yes.
to raise capable children who love themselves and are kind to others. That's pretty much it.
Yes, who are
Yeah.
not assholes. Sanjay and I always joke about this. We don't want to raise an asshole. Like, we are
Yes.
thankfully, in gratitude, in such a privileged space,
Yes.
but we still can't raise someone who is unkind and does not have compassion. And I wanted to go back to, what you were saying about having kids figuring it out on their own before intervening. I think it also helps them develop that gut instinct. It
Yeah.
helps them develop that sense of trust on themselves. So they're not looking and constantly seeking validation or instruction outside of what they know they are capable of. And so I think a lot of us didn't grow up with that either.
So, intuition is something that I believe strongly in. And I do have very strong intuition in this world. And I believe intuition is not something, I don't think it's something that can be taught per se, but it's something that you have and it can be fostered in a way. And a lot of it is trusting yourself, right? Intuition is trusting yourself. And my son has really good intuition when it comes to Uno. And I joke because I'll have one card left and he will somehow know what color on a number I'm holding. And he'll do this. He's like, Mommy, if I put this down, am I going to end? I'm like, I don't know. Like, you put down whichever card you want. And he 9 times out of 10 is putting down the card that would not end the game. Because if he had put down the other one, I would have ended the game. And I'm like, I tell my husband, I'm like, that's intuition. And what you just said, I'm like, I think he already is developing strong intuition because we're raising him to trust his emotions, trust himself, trust his body with food, trust himself with everything without gaslighting, without like, oh, you're fine. It's like, hey, yes, you got hurt, but we don't need to belabor it. Like, we're going to move through it. Yes, you got a boo-boo. Like, we're not going to like be like, oh my God, my sweetheart, like how terrible. No, it hurts. I get it.
Right.
I don't like
Validate.
getting hurt, but what can we do now to move forward? I think one of the misconceptions about parenting, especially this gentle parenting these days, is like sitting with validation for too long. I believe in validation, but we also have to move forward through that, right? Like, you can validate, but you can also say, listen, I know you're upset, but it's going to feel like it hurts for a little bit. What can we do now? Do you want to play this or redirect? And then not dismissing the pain, if that's, like using a fall as an example, but stating it and moving forward. Because that's also resiliency, that I get it. I don't like when I fall and hit my hand and we're going to put a Band-Aid on. Tomorrow we'll change the Band-Aid and that's what we're going to do, versus, oh my God, like you must be so sad. Like, no, like let's not rise this even more than it needs to be, because that's kind of when they learn to like this woe is me mentality of like, oh my God, pity me, pity me. No, it happened. We're moving forward.
Yeah, that victim mindset can carry you far actually into life. And you kind of went into my next question. I mean, we're seeing all of these posts and media articles about gentle parenting is the only way because you want to like validate their feelings. And then on the other hand, we got like kids need tough love and they need to build like this thick skin because the world's not fair. I mean, do you think modern parenting has become too soft, or are we finally getting it right? Or is the answer somewhere in the middle?
It is somewhere in the middle, because I think a lot of us, not everybody, but a lot of our generation was parented with a very like my way or the highway, right? Meaning a very like, this is what it's going to be. Not everybody, but like that it was a very authoritarian sort of like, I'm going to say I'm the boss, right? Especially, I mean, I know we're both Indian. That was very common in how we were parented. And maybe there was fear-based discipline, right? Meaning if you don't do this, you're going to get a timeout. If you don't do this, I'm taking away. Like, a lot of threats were being told. And whether that's physical or verbal, it was a lot of fear-based punishment. And I think that is not helpful. But on the flip side, I think a lot of us in this generation found things like gentle parenting and it's like, you know what, I want to do something different. And in some ways you can flip on the other end of enabling. And what I mean by that is when we start to validate too much and we don't separate the validation from moving forward, like I mentioned, we can start to enable those behaviors because they're getting our validation. And that feels good, right? So then they're like, well, if I do this, mommy sits with me and gets this sort of attention. So it's important to validate, but a part of my balance in the sort of gentle parenting, I don't like tying myself to a parenting style because I think you can take different things from different parenting styles. But I've found that the best parenting style that I can align with is something called lighthouse parenting, which is basically like you're their guide, but you're not going to meddle too much. Like literally that is. Yeah. And it's something that another pediatrician who's an adolescent medicine doctor, I believe is the one who coined it. I can't remember his name, but I was like, this makes sense for all ages, right? That what I mentioned about that autonomy versus intervention, I'm going to guide them home meaning secure, safe space at like with me, but I don't need to meddle. I don't need to do this whole big production, but I do need to understand that they get that I'm always there for them. Even if I get upset, even if they do something wrong, that they can trust me. And so at the core, it's whatever parenting style that you decide. Are you building the foundation of safety, trust, and respect? Right? Like, are you building this into the relationship with your child? Because you're more likely going to be able to discipline a child, which means to teach them things. It's not punishment, when they trust you, when they respect you, and when they feel safe. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of parents lose that when they don't hold boundaries, right? Well, I don't want my
Yes.
kid not to listen. No, you got
There it is.
the
Yep.
boundaries is trust. Following through with the boundary that's important to you as a family is how
Hmm.
they understand what's important. And so
Hmm.
it's taking those boundaries, taking the trust, the respect, putting it together and
Hmm.
saying, here
Hmm.
are the boundaries in our home. If this doesn't happen, I'm going to either do a related consequence, natural consequence. I'm
Hmm.
not going to threaten you. Like, it's not like, hey, you didn't do this, so you don't get this. It's like, hey, listen, in order to do this, we're going to do this next. Like, being very clear about the expectation, not
Yeah.
yelling, threatening. And if you do yell, repairing,
Yeah.
apologizing, saying, look, I'm taking
Yeah.
accountability for what I did, and we can both
Correct.
work on our feelings together, so that they don't think that
Yeah.
this is on them, that they're a burden, and that they are responsible for how you respond. Because at the end of the day, it's our responsibility, right? Like, I mean,
Absolutely.
we cannot blame our child for how we respond. We can say that, yes, it was a situation, but two people in the same situation, if one of them responds differently, goes to show you that it's on us, right? Like,
Yes.
it's not on the child. It's if you're yelling all the time, what is it that we need to do to stop you from yelling all the time? Like, is it
Yeah.
something more? Like, are you burnt out? Are you don't feel like you have support? There's something deeper about the
Sure.
yelling than just yelling at a kid.
You are absolutely right. I also think I lost my train of thought here. You were saying so many good things. When it comes to consequence versus threat, I get a lot of questions when I'm coaching my own clients and I'm teaching them about boundaries and how to hold boundaries with their family members, including their children. I get a lot of questions about, well, my boundaries are, if you don't do this, then this is the consequence. Isn't that a threat? What is your answer to that question?
So a lot of threats can be tone. A lot of threats can be obviously if your tone is elevated. So how you say it is, I think, more important than what you're saying a lot of the times. And also, is it in the moment because you're reactive, or was it something that was
Yeah.
before? So for example, let's use my son doesn't want to clean up his toys. Okay, just using an example.
Hmm.
And so he is fighting me for cleaning up the toys. And then the next thing in the routine is that we're going to watch some screen time. Just give you an example. Like, let's say
Sure.
after he cleans up his toys, he gets to watch screen time. Hey, look, part of being able to watch screens is that we have to clean up first and then we can
Hmm.
watch screen time. So if we don't clean up, we're not going to be able to watch screens, right? Like, so versus saying, like, listen, if you do not clean up that toy right now, we're not watching TV for
Mm,
the rest of the week. Like, so
yeah.
not only did I just do it in the moment, but I also got agitated. So two things. And
Sure.
the expectation might need to happen before. So another example is my son he's only 5, but I do want to teach him about responsibility for items, right?
Hmm.
So he'll
Yeah.
always forget his backpack in the car. And
Yeah.
so part of the routine is like, if he wants to have a snack, he's got to bring the backpack in the house, empty out the backpack, which means put the water bottle in the sink,
Hmm.
put the stuff in, and that in order to do the next thing in our routine. And that is
Yeah.
how he gains the routine. And if he fights me on it, I don't get mad. I say, well, listen, in order to do this next, we have to empty out the bag. So you can decide when you do it, and then we can have the snack. And
Yeah.
usually he'll do it because he wants the snack and it's something that was part of the routine. But that is how you can start to incorporate, but you set the expectation before the moment. So if you're
Yeah.
struggling with whatever it is, I want you to think about before you get into that moment, setting it up with that child. Hey, listen,
Yeah.
I know we're trying to figure out what we can do about, cleaning up your room. What we're going to
Mhm.
do is we're going to come home, you're going to clean up your room, and then we're going to do this as a family. And
Yeah.
setting that up versus not including the threat in there, just setting
Exactly.
up the
That's what it is. Right.
expectation so that they
Right.
understand what is this, what is my guardian, the caregiver, I'm that person who's in charge of me essentially,
Hmm.
what are they requiring of me, and making it very clear without threatening them in the beginning. Like, okay, well,
Yeah.
if you don't do this, you're not getting ice cream tomorrow. Like, it's
Hmm.
not, they don't care.
And also, they don't relate to each other,
They
right?
don't care. Right, right. Exactly. That's one of the biggest things. Like, hey, if you do this, I'm canceling our trip next week. It's like
Yeah.
they'll probably turn around like, I don't even want to go on the trip. And then what? You're
Exactly.
stuck.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
One, you don't want to ever throw out a consequence that you're not going to follow up on. Like,
Hmm.
if you're going to say, I'm going to turn this car around if you don't stop yelling, are you really going to turn the car around? Probably not. Like, you got
Right.
to think about like, hey, if you don't stop talking, or if you don't stop yelling at your sister, I'm going to turn down the music. Like something that is actually a consequence. Like if they're fighting over the songs, hey, listen,
Yeah.
if we're going to keep fighting, I'm going to turn off the music. So you guys can either pick who's going to choose the song or we turn it off.
Yeah.
Those are your two
I
options.
love it.
Like there's
And
no,
it's
there's
clear.
no like I'm turning this and then you follow through. And that's
Right.
how they learn to trust you because you follow through. My son, obviously he's 5. He's going to test boundaries and that's very
Yeah.
normal as they age, but it's the
Right.
consistency. And as they get older, for any of your listeners who have older children, it's collaborative. It's, you're not the
Yes.
one making all the rules. You can incorporate them in
Mhm.
the rule making and saying, hey, look, I can tell you really want pizza every night for dinner. So we can't have pizza every night because I want us to eat variety. What day do you want to have pizza? I
Mhm.
want pizza Fridays. Okay, I like that idea. Every
Yeah.
Friday you can choose what we have for pizza on toppings, da da da. You can help me place the order. Giving them control and giving them choice makes it feel like it's a team and it's not this
Yeah.
authoritarian, okay, you do this because I say so. Because it's not like that.
Absolutely.
It's a team here.
Absolutely.
We're trying to
Absolutely.
be a family and raise this amazing child together, as if you have a partner, but even with their
Yeah.
help also.
Do you ever feel like you are juggling a million things at once? Especially if you are a business owner. You're trying to grow your business, but also, run your business. It can feel like you are drowning in your to-dos with barely a moment to breathe, let alone dream bigger. I have been there. Now, look, I tried hiring a gamut of virtual assistants, but it often felt like there was just one other thing on my to do list. I had to spoon feed tasks, constantly check in, recheck their work, and still worry about things slipping through the cracks. It wasn't until I found Savannah and Natalie at Every Virtual Solutions that I truly understood the difference between help and the right kind of help. They have extensive marketing, development, and executive assistant backgrounds so they can take the weight off of your shoulders so you can focus on what you do best, being the visionary. Book a free discovery call on their website and mention this episode for a 10% discount for your first 6 months. Head over to everyvirtualsolutions.com. That's EVERAE virtualsolutions.com. Whether it's web design, content creation, email management, social media, PR, or anything in between, I know you will find a way to work together to lighten your load. It's time to end the burnout and start focusing on you. Yeah. And I love the idea of including, if they are a little bit older, your kid into the decision making, even consequence making too,
Yes.
before the scenario. So, hey, we've been having trouble. Gia, I think half of the lost and found at our school is Gia's stuff,
Yeah.
but we've been having trouble with her gathering her things at school and bringing it home. And so, similar conversation, like, look, mommy and daddy work very hard to provide. And when you are leaving things that we are providing for you at school, really it makes us feel that you're not valuing your items or valuing how hard we work. So because you are having trouble, let's figure out a system. How are you going to remember to bring your water bottle, your jacket? This girl lost shoes somewhere. I mean,
Yeah,
I
I'm sure.
can't even. It's beyond my understanding,
You're
but
like,
it's
how are you
happening.
barefoot right now? Like, where's your sock?
She
Yeah,
has
come on.
lost a beautiful pair of Crocs that she got for
Oh my
Christmas.
gosh.
They were like
Yeah.
black and sparkly with like cutesy little, what are they called? The giblets or giblets or
Yeah.
clearly I'm not on board here. But anyway, but yeah, really having her involved in the plan of how she can empower herself to remember on her own and also know that we are there for support. And then also she can choose her consequence too. I
Yeah.
can maybe give her a couple of choices just to kind of keep it within her normal boundary and knowing what her boundaries are, but also having her comfortable with the consequence. And it's not like this top down direction. So for anyone that's thinking about that out there, it's working for us and Gigi. And I think it is a sense of inclusion
Yeah.
and empowerment when you are involving your kids in the discussion about them.
Yeah. They feel good. And especially like you think about your child over all children, but especially your older 4 child, they have the cognitive understanding and the desire for autonomy and control
Yes.
to want to be included in those family meetings and say, hey, let's talk about this issue. Like versus what you might have done when they were toddlers, which is like, okay,
Yep.
I'm directing more, right? Because
Yeah.
they can't have a
Sure.
say, but you want to incorporate autonomy whenever you can, and an option for control that's within the boundary, right?
Yeah.
That is very possible. And it's about getting creative and figuring out. And like we talked about at the beginning at that first question of like figuring out where you're going to pivot in that moment. Sometimes if they defy you, not taking it personally and saying, okay, now what
Yeah.
am I going to do in this situation? I've had that with my husband where sometimes our strategies don't work and we look at each other and we're like, what do you want to do? Like we mutter,
Hmm.
like I go over to my husband and I whisper, I'm like, what do you want to do? He's like, I think we gotta switch this. I'm like, I agree, let's do it. And then we like break, go back. It's like,
Yes.
like, and then we
Yes.
figure it out. And that's part of the parenting learning process, which I
Yeah.
enjoy being a
Yeah.
parent because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love how you say you do enjoy that. I enjoy that too. I find it as like a fun challenge that's not
Challenge.
threatening,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
No one's
Yes.
lives are in danger.
Yes.
This
No
is
one's going to
all
get
within,
ruined.
correct. This is
Right.
within the safety of our home. This is within the safety of our family. And if you are raising children with a partner, it is done in a partnership way. And everyone needs to be on the same page. That's another tip that I
Oh
love
yeah.
to kind of throw in there. And if there is a disagreement, we got to compromise in figuring out how to put up a united front. In addition to being able to pivot, not aiming for perfection, what are other mindset tips that you can give out for parents who are really feeling overwhelmed, not only through the sheer volume of information that's out there, but even the fear mongering or overwhelmed by the lack of support we have in our current society? Obviously, we can't change everything
Yeah.
all at once, but what are some things that they can shift within their own realm to help make it a little bit easier?
So one of the biggest things is remembering that they don't need you to be perfect. They just need you to be
Yeah.
connected when you're able to, right? So I say this because I've gone through many changes in my schedule. In the pandemic, I was working full time at a very busy medical practice, had one, my son. It was
Yeah.
very difficult. We had no childcare help. It was so exhausting. And we were
I
in a season
remember.
where it just wasn't easy. And then I went through IVF and it was so hard. And when you reflect back now, like when things are better, I sometimes get a little bit guilty of like what my son had versus what my daughter has because they both have different versions of me, right? And what brings me solace is knowing that we did the best that we could with the information and resources we had at that current moment. And that's one of the biggest things that I always tell my families is that you can't know what's going to happen in the future. You can't go back in the past. You can only work
Yeah.
with what you have now. And that's information and resources, right? When you're taking all the information in and you're like, oh my God, but what if? Like, what if my kid
Yes. It's
gets
the what
measles?
ifs that
Yeah.
gets everybody.
Yeah, you're not thinking about the now. You're not thinking about what we talk about a lot is what are we able to control in this moment? And
Mhm.
especially when it comes to health, and I use the measles, outbreak as an example, get so many worried parents like, well, should I stop taking my child to childcare? And I also think about, well, what's sustainable for you? Think about benefit risk and think
Mm.
about like,
Yeah.
also people will ask like, what about play dates? I'm like, I'm not stopping play dates because social life is really important to me. My daughter is also
Mm.
vaccinated with one and my son is fully, but it's like,
Right.
there's not an outbreak in my area. So you got to think about the information you have. The resources include not only childcare help, but also your mental health resources. Do I maybe
Mhm.
want to do more screen time because it gives me a break? Fine. If this is a
Yes.
season of more screen time, don't guilt yourself, right? Look at
Yeah.
things as seasons and look at things as maybe now. And this is not what I want to do for the future. Maybe
Right.
I'm doing it now because I don't have help, which is what we did with our son. Our
Yeah.
daughter doesn't watch barely any screen time because we have help, right? Like
Right.
we have a nanny who's able to take her out when I'm working versus me having to work with a toddler nearby all the
Yes.
time. And it was so hard. And like, I think parents forget that you're going to have seasons, whether you have two children, one child, it doesn't matter, and not beating yourself up over that. And then that is also going to help you consume information better, where you're taking what you need and just distancing yourself from what you may not need to use at that time. And
Yes.
that's an art, like saying,
Yes.
here's what I need to know. Am I following a lot of accounts that are just giving me information that makes me more anxious? Doing like a body check whenever you follow an
Mhm.
account. And if you're getting a bad vibe that every time I see a post from that person, I feel weird,
Yeah.
maybe mute them or unfollow them. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
mean anything personal. It means that maybe at
Correct.
that moment of your life, they're not serving you for what you need. And that is
Yes.
not anything more than just protecting your peace. That,
Absolutely. And there doesn't
and
have to be a
yeah,
logistical reason either. You don't
no,
have
you
to
don't have to
unpack
justify.
that. It's not that deep. Just
No,
unfollow, mute. It's all
mute.
right. You're feeling what you're feeling and move on.
Yeah. And I think, that goes into like comparison as the other mindset tip that I say, comparison is the thief of joy. And when every child is different, every circumstance is different, every family is different, every
Yeah.
resource is different. Like we cannot assume or expect our lives to be similar to anyone else's, nor our child's development, their growth, the way they eat, the way they sleep, everything about our children, not only between family to family, but between child to child. Like for listeners who may have more than one child, comparing the two of them is not healthy or helpful for anyone in that family. And you're going to lose the joy if you have a child who's seemingly easier than another. Because I want to give an example that my daughter is quote unquote easier than my son in terms of temperament. It doesn't mean she's easy and everything, but you got to be careful that we don't put Ryan in that sort of bucket of like, well, no,
Exactly.
he's more difficult, because he's not. He's just more emotional like I am. He's more strong-willed like I am. That's not a negative quality. It's just harder to
Yeah.
parent, right? Because
Yeah.
and my daughter will be like, okay, that's like my husband. And so now I
Yeah.
look at my husband, I'm like, thank you for dealing with me. I love you.
I say the same thing to Sanjay because
It's like
Gia
you.
has,
So funny.
yeah, she's a beautiful mix of both of us. Like a lot of her energy is Sanjay, a lot of her spontaneity, creativity, her silliness. That is all my husband. But when it comes to her strong-willed
Yeah.
energy and her stubbornness, and even the kind of the worry wart portion of her, I look at my husband, I'm like, I would say I'm sorry, but I'm not because you married
Yeah.
me and this is what we produced. But I'm kind of
I
sorry,
get it.
but we need to figure out. Yeah, I get how, and I've also apologized to my parents. I'm like, I am so sorry. I was such an asshole when I was a child.
I
But
mean,
if you
I
weren't
can
taught
imagine.
otherwise,
Yeah.
right? You weren't taught otherwise, or we didn't have, or they didn't have the tools or really the bandwidth, right? That we do now to learn about how to pivot, how to adapt, how to manage emotions, how to validate emotions. And
Yeah.
so I'm glad we're able to provide that and be able to learn alongside our children.
And I think that point right there gives a lot of compassion to our parents. Even obviously, I know some people, whether you felt like you were verbally or physically abused. I'm not giving passes for that, but
Sure.
understanding that there is so much that they didn't have resources to. Like my husband and I talk about that all the time, that our parents were not perfect people. They were immigrants. They had to work really hard, but they also didn't get to hang out with us on a Tuesday at 3 o'clock. Like
Yeah.
our schedule sometimes allows that my husband's home because he's not on shift and I'm
Yeah.
done with meetings and work. And literally we're playing with our kids at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, which is such a privilege to have the
Absolutely.
privilege of time and still be able to pay for bills. And
Yes.
I don't blame my parents. I mean, they were younger. They had no emotional regulation skills that me and my husband
Hmm.
have learned through therapy and life. And they
Hmm.
also just didn't have the time, and they had to run errands. And I have so many of my
Exactly.
families who do this, right? So many of
Yeah.
my families are trying to make ends meet with multiple jobs, having to do
Hmm.
things with their child present, their child's throwing a
Hmm.
tantrum, they lose their cool, they may yell, they may hit. And I'm not giving
Hmm.
them a pass, but I understand how if you have no regulation skills and if you don't have any help or space, why someone would resort to that when they
Yeah.
didn't have anyone to help them. And it's not a
Yeah.
pass of saying it's okay to hit, but it's
Correct.
compassion, understanding how can I help this family? Like how can
Yes.
we change the system so that people and parents can raise children and they're not feeling aggravated and angry? And I see child abuse cases. How can we change that cycle? Because it's so much
Yeah.
deeper than just hitting your kid. It's
Yes.
resources, it's anger
There's
management,
always
it's all of that.
exactly.
Yeah.
There's always a background story to everyone's actions, feelings, and reactions. What are some persistent I feel like I'm opening a can of worms here. What
Oh,
are some persistent myths that are just it drives Dr. Mona up the fucking wall?
I'm starting to climb up walls while you say it. There's a few, but I think one of the biggest ones is obviously the vaccines. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many things about vaccines. And again, we could do a whole 4-hour
We could.
conversation.
We could.
But the vaccine misinformation, and I'm going to even clarify this to vaccine lack of nuance in discussion. And that comes from both ends, right? Like when we as clinicians say vaccines are safe, I think that they're safe, but we should really say that the benefits outweigh risks, right?
Yes.
Everything like we put into our body can come with risk. That's like meaning if you take an antibiotic, correct? Like you could have
Yes.
an allergic reaction or you could have
Correct.
stomach upset. So I like to phrase that terminology, but on the flip side, there's far more misinformation. And that makes me very stressed because obviously vaccines, especially the ones that we have routinely, the ones that we give on routine schedule, do provide a lot of benefit. And we see diseases at bay because of them. And so when you see outbreaks like measles and things that are vaccine preventable, you kind of just get a little frustrated of like, but this could have been prevented, right? So that's one thing that, again, I don't want to go into much deeper unless you need to. The other one is just I think a lot of parents think that they have to be harsh to get their point across. And we talked about
Oh,
that already
interesting.
with like the boundary setting. Like I love boundary setting. And I think I love talking about boundary setting because
Mm-hmm.
there is such an art. Like we've only given our son one time out in his entire life and he's 5. And it was because I could not handle his emotions at that time. So I put him in a crib. He was like 19 months at the time. And I just stepped out of the door because I was so overwhelmed. It wasn't for him. But we
Right.
don't use timeouts. I have nothing against timeouts, but I think we can do more of that collaborative approach and
Mm-hmm.
more of that, expectation, consequences that make sense for the age versus threats versus timeouts versus removal of privileges of like that may
Mm-hmm.
not make sense to the situation like we talked about. But I want parents to understand that there are ways beyond just what you may hear, like, okay, put your kid in a timeout, because even the American Academy of Pediatrics still recommends timeouts. And I think it's a great last resort, but I don't think
Yeah.
it's my first resort. And I think that's a big myth. And then the last one was what you're saying, that on the flip side, it's this sort of, if I don't give my kids space with me to feel their feelings, that I'm going to just push their feelings down. There is a balance.
Yeah.
You got to let them feel their feelings, but you also got to remind them that they can feel, but we're also going to move forward. And that's
Yes.
reiterating what I already mentioned, but that also drives me up a wall, because then parents are coming in with like, well, I'm using these gentle parenting tips and like validation. I'm like, okay, but let's talk about the validation and how much are we doing this? Like there is a balance here. If their kid is constantly like breaking down and you are constantly validating, do we not understand that they could be doing that because you're giving them that connection time? So how can
Yeah.
we change that behavior doesn't need to happen for their validation to come in? Can we bring
Yes.
validation in other moments? How are we connecting outside of tantrums? When that is happening, can we give a validation and move through? Like, hey, I know you're upset. I'm just going to give you some space. I have to go into the kitchen and finish this. I'm going to come and check in on you. That's not abandoning,
Right.
and that goes into alignment with all the sleep training stuff, like anti-sleep training, like we're abandoning, like it's child abuse. They're going to end up with psychological issues. It's not if you are checking in. It's not if you are setting
Correct.
expectation. It's not if you are overall a very loving, connected person, but leaving your child in a crib for 10 minutes, leaving, coming back in to check in, like the Ferber method, is a magical thing. Like
It
I
really
have
is.
Ferbered both my children in some capacity at some point in their lives. And it's because of that they are the most excellent sleepers, that we go in, but we give them some space. I put my timer on. If my son doesn't cry like that anymore. He's 5. But like for my daughter, it's like, we did the same thing for my son. And I can't tell you that giving them some space to feel without hounding them all the time is also helpful. But people don't want to hear that because there's so much out there that says, well, you can't do that. That's abandonment.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not there. You have to be there. You can't drop off your kid to daycare. They need a parent for 3 years, the first 3 years. Like that stuff drives me up a wall. I'm like, are you
Yeah.
freaking kidding me? Like you
I
think that
agree.
a child is not going to have a healthy attachment because they went to daycare and they came back to a parent that could pay the bills and was emotionally
Exactly.
attached?
Yes.
So what do you want? You want them not to work and you want them to be stressed at home with you all
Yes.
day?
Yes.
Like that's the
the
alternative.
answer. That's the alternative.
Like, I'd rather have them in daycare where the parent can work, make the bills
Yeah.
paid, feel like they're maybe doing something for themselves. And then
Right.
they pick up their kid. They have 2 hours, 3 hours at night, whatever. And they have
Yeah.
meaningful connection versus
Quality
half-ass
over
connection.
quantity.
Yes.
Absolutely. Hands
And that is
down.
why you can see I'm like, I'm rising out of my seat. Like, it's like,
You're almost
ooh,
at the top there.
ooh. Like whenever I see all this misconstruction of attachment theory, I'm like, people are taking it to the extreme. And I'm like, we're ruining parents' lives by telling them that this is what has to happen. I don't mind if a mom or dad wants to do that, because that's
Right.
what's but the alternative is not harmful, is what I try to say, right? Like,
Yes.
if you don't want to sleep train, fine. If you don't want to send your kid to childcare, fine. If you don't want to do X, Y, and Z, fine. But the alternative is not ruining our kids. It's sometimes it's survival. Sometimes you want to do that. Sometimes you need to sleep. And these are awesome solutions. Like, I wouldn't recommend any of these if they harmed a kid, right? Same thing with vaccines. Like, why would I want any child to be psychologically damaged or physically damaged? Like, that is not my cup of tea. And I want kids to lead healthy, thriving lives alongside their parents and caregivers.
Yeah.
So I think that's a hard misconception that I'm constantly battling. And, it's hard on social because there's so many loud voices that speak the opposite. But the bigger I get, the more I'm like, let's go. Let's go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which is why I'm so grateful for your platform and the way you approach. I've seen you approach haters out there, bullies, the cyberbullying, and I love the transparency. I know you've done a few screenshots of your guys' DMs and how you approach with your own education, boundaries, and also willingness to chat. It's not
Yeah.
like, this is what I know, this is what science says, this is what you need to believe. It's all of that plus, hey, I would love to know your perspective, where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation. I think a lot of the myths and the misinformation we're battling is coming from absolutes, kind of like what you were
Yes.
saying,
Yeah.
right?
Earlier.
So
Yeah.
if it's not this, then it's that and the end. And when in reality, like you said, every child is different, every parent is different. We are coming from a variety of experiences, emotions, and backgrounds. And it's not a one size fits
Yeah.
all. And if you're not doing sleep training, and if sleeping with your kids makes you happy and content and satisfied and not driving you crazy, and you're all sleeping well,
Yeah. Exactly.
then go do it. I mean, no
Yes.
one's judging you, or I'm not judging you, neither is Dr. Mona.
Yes, exactly. These two people right here. It's like exactly that. And it's like going back to the noise, right? Making choices that
Yeah.
make sense. But then I get very upset because so much of that narrative is like, well, the alternative is like a lot of the people who are pro that can like
Yeah.
fault the other side. Where can we elevate
Absolutely.
our choices but not put the other side down,
Yes,
right? And
exactly.
vaccines are a hard one because the choices someone makes with vaccines affects other people. That's where it gets a little bit
Yeah.
different than I think any other parenting choice, right? Because vaccines, if you don't vaccinate your child, that can impact communities, right? Like we
Mhm.
think about measles outbreaks, but anything else, like it is going to be more of this understanding of you can, if you want to co-sleep, if you want to do this,
Mhm.
your decision is not impacting my life. And so I could care less as long as you know
Yeah,
benefit risk, as long as you know all of that. But
absolutely.
sometimes as educators online, you don't see that. You see well, if you don't like it's meant to co-sleep. We're meant to do this. We're meant to sleep train. No, it's choice. There is
Yeah.
choice. But I
Yeah, I
also want
agree.
people to sleep. And like you said, sleep well, because
Mhm.
if I don't sleep well, it's not pretty. So I don't want
Same.
that to happen to other families, that we can actually get them sleep if it's possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I wanna switch gears a little bit here and focus on you, Mona.
Oh,
You have been so wonderfully transparent and vulnerable on social media about your own journey regarding birth trauma and secondary infertility. I know a quick, few minute synopsis is not going to do justice to what you have gone through and the work that you continue to do on yourself. But I would love our listeners to continue to know and be reminded that we are all human, no matter what type of platform we have, and we've all gone through hardship. So, do you mind sharing a little bit about your birth trauma journey and then being diagnosed with secondary infertility?
yeah. And so, yeah, it is. I have my whole birth story on my website. This is from my son, Ryan, who was born 2019. And basically, it was a combination in a nutshell of not having any sign that things were going to go bad. And then things went really south very quickly. Not only for him, he was in the NICU for 10 days and I was in the ICU for 10 days. So it was not ever expected. It was C-section. It wasn't a stat C-section. It was a failure to progress, but I hate using that term. I wasn't dilating, let's say that. And had to go C-section because it had been many hours, and the water bag had broken. And
Mhm.
yeah, he was very sick. They couldn't get him out. He was blue, limp, and he ended up having a stroke and a seizure from the trauma of the delivery. And then I ended up having complications from everything that happened, and a very rare condition that I later found out I had after having my second child. But in any case, it was very, very traumatic in that he was sick. I was sick. My
Yeah.
husband, the ER doctor, who is very
Yes.
calm, cool, and collected, had to be in that room, watch everything happen. He had to
Yeah.
deal with the trauma. We had to deal with that lack of not meeting the expectation of what we envisioned having our first child to be. We didn't get to take home our kid on the second, third day of life. We were stuck in a hospital. He was well before I was. There wasn't that sort of go home. In Indian culture, we do this sort of ceremony that you like write a
Yeah.
letter and stick
Mhm.
it in stick it in like a drawer to like
Yeah.
what the story of the child's life is going to be. I wasn't able to be home for that ceremony, so we had to do it in the
Yeah.
hospital for my son. For my daughter, I was also sick, and they had to do it without me while I was in the hospital. So managing that expectation of that I will never have a delivery that goes like everyone else says. Yeah,
Yeah.
I popped
The
out a baby, and
expectation.
yeah, I popped out a baby, went home. It was actually really beautiful. I will never call my deliveries beautiful. They were traumatizing. They were
Yeah.
awful, and it's okay to say that. And with
Yeah.
secondary infertility, I had my son. We conceived without any fertility treatments. It was, whatever we want to call it, like natural, normal way.
Mm-hmm.
And then because of all the scar tissue and trauma from his delivery, I ended up developing a hydrosalpinx, which is fluid coming back into the fallopian tube from scar tissue and inflammation from the surgeries that I had, because I had a lot of surgeries to fix what happened. And I found that out after seeing a fertility doctor. We got my fallopian tube out so that we could start IVF, and we started IVF, got one embryo. By the luck of everything, it ended up being my daughter, who I have now, with one embryo. We had a scheduled transfer. It didn't happen because my lining wasn't right, or they saw things in my lining that didn't seem safe to transfer. We had to push it back. It just felt like setback after setback. And then they transferred her the day my grandmother died. I remember this so vividly. My grandmother died at 12, like after midnight, and we still transferred that same day. It went perfectly. My internet went out for the 2 days after, which my internet never goes out. And I really believe it was my grandma saying, Mona, you really need to rest. Like, I'm talking like, you're not going to get on your computer and do work. You are going to take a nap for 2 days. And I slept. I read a book. I didn't go on my computer. I didn't do anything that would raise my blood pressure. I literally just rested. And my daughter's here now. And she's 21 months now at the time of this recording. And I'm done having kids. My husband and I think about having more, but there's the only way we could have biological children is if I did another round of retrieval and then we do a surrogate, which I'm 40 almost. We just don't think that it makes sense for our family for the time and the age that we are. We have our children, but listen, the combination of traumatic delivery plus IVF is just a compounded trauma. And the fertility journey, I would say, was even harder because there was no end. And I think you understand, like, there was no like definitive, right? With the birth trauma, you see progress in vital signs. You see that, okay, I'm not going to be in this hospital forever. Although it was very traumatizing, I started to heal. My body healed. But with secondary infertility, you just don't know. You're putting all your money, time. I had to cut back on hours because I couldn't make the appointments. Like, you know how you have to go every 2 days to check lining or whatever.
Job. Yeah.
I mean, I had to cut back, and I'm grateful for my job at that point, understanding. And I had gone through so much from my son's delivery to the birth trauma to like all that they became very understanding of the situation. But I had to cut back hours because I wasn't able to show up for my clinic. Right. And I was calling out so much. I'm happy I had to, it meant less salary, but at least they were accommodating for me to be able to do that versus, sorry, you got to figure it out, which they did not, which I'm grateful.
Thankfully.
But it was so difficult. Going through that just really reminded me just so much of the difficulty so many parents have to conceive, carry a baby, and have a healthy baby, because I experienced all of it, right? I had difficulty conceiving my second. I had a child who's in the NICU who had a seizure and a stroke, medical issue at birth. And then I had complications during pregnancy. I had IVF. So I have felt all the different ways that it doesn't go perfect in the road to becoming a mother. And to me, that's really changed my approach to pediatric care, how I speak to families, how when they come in and it's a C-section mom and they're standing up, I'm like, are you okay? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm fine. I'm like, oh, I get it. Like, I couldn't walk for 6 weeks because of the amount of complications I had, which is, if anyone's listening and hasn't had a child, that's very unusual for you not to be able to walk for 6 weeks post C-section. But I couldn't walk up straight until 6 weeks. I needed help to stand up straight because of the amount of scar tissue and surgeries that I had. And so when I see a mom, there's always been compassion, but there's a lot more. There's a lot more touchy-feely conversations around mental health. Whether it's traumatic or not, like I'm like, how are you feeling? There's a lot more conversation and feelings about breastfeeding, formula feeding. There's a lot more, what do you want to do versus here's what we need to do. There's, how do you feel about adding formula? How do you feel about your breastfeeding journey? Do you like it? Is it something that's enjoyable to you? And I advise my families to do what's best for them, which I tended to always do, but it's a lot more mom-centric now. My advice is very much mom-centric because I cannot have a healthy baby in my office if mom's not healthy. And that's physically and emotionally. And I realized that when I abandoned my breastfeeding journey to support formula for my son, because it meant more rest. It meant more time with my son versus pumping and being attached to a pump. And then for my daughter, I did pump and I did breastfeed because I was able to. But I don't look at my child different. Like, I don't look at my son didn't get breastfeeding and I'm a horrible mom. I look at they each got a different version of me. And in that, they both got a beautiful version of me as well. They got growth. They got someone who understood themselves. They understood their shortcomings, but they also understood a mom who knew when she had limitations and listened to her body and her mind versus trying to push through. And I think that is such a beautiful thing that we can do as mothers, I have a feeling a lot of moms listen here, but just
Yeah.
recognizing that we don't have to be perfect and things aren't going to go according to plan, but it's
Yes.
okay that things aren't always going to be that way. It's okay that you
Yeah.
may pivot, and it's okay that you make a change in your decision making that works best for you, because you
Absolutely.
matter more, I would say, than the child sometimes,
A
because we
hundred
tend to focus
percent.
so much more on baby, but we forget mom once that baby's born.
We do. And, that's where
Mhm.
the fourth trimester talk comes in. And even
Yeah.
as an internal medicine physician, most of my patients follow up with their OBGYN for 6 weeks. But after those 6 weeks, I'm still asking them, how are you doing? How are
Yeah.
you holding up? And very similar questions. And I'm not even in charge of their baby.
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
or a lot of their obstetrics care, but the mental health portion of this is so difficult. It's not concentrated on enough. So I'm really thank you for sharing. Thank you
Yeah.
for being vulnerable and going back to that space. I know that's not easy. How have those experiences changed the way you parent, or do you think it's changed the way you parent?
Being a pediatrician and then being a parent, like, people often ask, like, in general, does being a pediatrician make you a better doctor, or does being a doctor make you a better mom? Like, people often ask me that question, regardless of the trauma and stuff. And
Hmm.
it's equal. I mean, I would say I learned so much from being a pediatrician that I can bring home to, obviously, my children. But I think the biggest thing is the reverse, that being a mom has taught me so much more about the interactions that I have with these families, and the
Yeah.
understanding of the lack of all the other social issues that may be happening, that before they even get into my room, right? Like, I've gone through the lack of help, all of that. And I think one of the biggest thing that it's done for me is it's really controlled my ego a lot. Like, I used to have
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
bigger ego in medicine. And that means, like, I used to be very like, well, this is what I say. Like, this is what
Hmm.
this is what we're going to do. And that was, that chip on your shoulder coming out of residency. And I really have toned that down. And not only has that benefited me in my practice, but it's also benefited me in my personal life. It's benefited me as a
Hmm.
mom, to just kind of say, you don't know everything. You don't
Yeah.
have to know everything. You're
Yeah.
not going you can't predict everything. You need to use better language. You need to understand that you are not all knowing, and that whether it's a parenting issue, whether it's a health issue with a patient, it's having more of that collaborative approach. And like I said, that
Yes.
helps with mothering too, right? Like, and not being like taking things personally. I used to take things very personally, like, oh, I'm being attacked, and that's
Mhm.
just from my upbringing. I know where
Yeah.
that came from. And that work was therapy. That work was just seeing the patterns in my life, and seeing, like, I don't like how that's showing up, not only in my job, but also in my marriage, and also with my child, and just letting that go more. And really just offering more of that relatable, doable strategies, like, hey, here's what the AAP says. It may not be easy. Like, I give screen time as an example. I don't go by the AAP screen time recommendations, and I explain why I don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why I go off, or I may not do, like, like, when it comes to the sugar requirements or anything. Like,
Oh,
I want us to
yes.
keep I want us to keep screens at a minimum. I don't want us to do too much added sugar, but I'm not sitting there doing a chart of, like, okay,
Calculating.
well, we
Yes.
watched an hour and now you had 8 grams of added sugar, and no, you
Yeah.
can't eat the cupcake. Like, that all
Can you
adds stress.
imagine? Oh, geez,
Oh
yes.
my, I mean, like, the parents will ask, like, how much iron is my kid supposed to get today? And I'm like, are you seriously going to count the iron? Like, are you
Yeah,
going to sit
right.
there and count the iron? Like, I give tough love.
Wow.
And I mean, that sounds, but
Yeah.
I'm like, unless we are dealing with an iron deficiency, or dealing with something that you're
Correct.
seeing a nutritionist, there is no
Yes.
reason that any parent needs to calculate anything for
Correct.
their child.
Yes.
Calories, what's going into their body,
100%.
screen
Yes.
time, tummy time. The more we're counting things, the more stressed we're going to become. And so,
Yes.
part of that relatability is, like, when I hear people like, you need to do 20 minutes of tummy time, I'm like, when you're postpartum and you can't even
Yes.
remember the last time you showered, and you're still wearing a diaper,
Correct.
are you going to remember that you did 20 minutes of tummy time? Rather, let me
Yeah.
tell you, when you are awake with the baby, we are going to try to do tummy time on your chest. You're going to talk to your
Yeah.
baby, versus making it more accessible to the life
Yeah.
of a parent, versus making it feel like
Yes.
work, is what I try to do with a
Yeah.
lot of my education, so
I
that they
love
feel
that.
like this is fun. Like, I know
Yes.
parenting is hard, but like I've said, it is a whole lot of fun. And when you can
Yeah.
try to see the fun and see the glimmers, is when you start
Yeah.
to realize that it isn't all bad. It's obviously very hard. And I'm not denying that
Yes.
there are seasons of hard. But in the end, you get this amazing privilege. And we can say that, having had fertility issues, it is an
Mhm.
amazing privilege being able to have a child and raise a child. Like I look
Yes.
at it as a gift that I've been given, and I treat it as such. It doesn't mean I don't yell. It doesn't mean that I talk to my
Of
husband some
course.
nights and I'm like, oh my God, that was a horrible day. Like, I'm so glad they went to
Hmm.
bed. That happens. But in the end, there's gratitude for this experience. And that's what I want every family to feel, that I
100%.
like this more than I hate it.
Yeah.
Because what kind of a situation, and even on the darkest days that I had no help for 2 years, I
Yeah.
loved being a mom, even though it was very hard when we had no help, we had no family, nobody. And it was just me
Yeah.
and my husband using childcare, like meaning a daycare, and he was sick
Yeah.
every 2 weeks. We
Yeah.
were just like, okay, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And I loved my son. And I mean, I look back at how difficult that was and how easy it feels now. And I'm like,
Yes.
man, like we are so grateful to be where we are now. And I will never demean that time. I grew so much as a human during that time, you know?
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
okay to feel both as a
Yes.
parent. It's okay to feel, man, right now my kid sucks. Like she's
Yes.
not being the nicest, kindest person like I'm raising her. However, I can also feel grateful that she's here and the
Yeah.
fact that I'm allowing her space to. It's funny, I'm saying this because this is a real life example that literally just happened this morning. I'm allowing her space to feel what she's feeling. She's pissed at me because I told her hair doesn't look great and she
Yeah.
walked out the door. And I still remember before Gia left, she was not the happiest with me. And I told her, I love you. Have a wonderful day at school. And she mumbles the same back. She's
Okay.
like, I love you. Have a wonderful day at work. And I'm like, no, just because we're mad at each other right now, I want clear words. So we look at each other and we say, I love you, have a good day at work and have a good day at school. And we say it to each other. And I'm like, I'm not happy with her right now, but man, I love this child all at the same time because we still got a chance to connect, right?
Yeah.
Even through the anger, through the disappointment, through whatever feeling she was feeling, we got a chance to connect. And that was such a beautiful moment that I literally experienced like 3 hours ago. And it's okay to feel both as a parent. It's okay to be like, oh crap, like they were just on my very last nerve today. And also tomorrow's another day and it'll be better.
I mean, if you're lucky enough to have a partner who understands, I think it's the biggest gift because I'm going to be very candid, and I think that's what we do on these podcasts.
Absolutely.
So when I was younger, my dad used to hit me whenever I misbehaved, and he would take me to a
Mhm.
wall and slap me across my face. And I'm just being, I
Mhm.
say it very openly, loving father who was doing the best he could, but he did
Mhm.
hit me. And
Mhm.
when my son is acting up, I've turned to my husband. I say, now I understand
Yeah.
why my dad took me to that wall. Like, I
Yeah.
get it. Like, if I was acting like this, I can
Yeah.
understand why my father, who was working so much and trying to figure out like making money in this country,
Mhm.
I'm not excusing him for that, like I said earlier.
Correct.
But now when my son is acting up, my husband and I have like a code phrase, like it was a take him to the wall kind of day. Like,
Yeah.
because I'm not going to do that to my son, but it's,
Right.
we joke about that, but we do not joke
Yeah.
about it in front of our child. But in
Absolutely.
privacy,
Yes.
he was like, it was a wall kind of day, wasn't it? I'm like, listen, I was a wall kind of day. It was a wall kind of day. And we laugh about it because
Yeah.
that is the space to laugh about it in private. My son will
Privacy.
never
Correct.
hear. I mean, I'm sharing it now. When he grows
Yes.
up, maybe I'll tell him like, yeah, mommy
Yes. He
sometimes
will
felt
have the
frustrated.
frontal lobe
Yeah.
development at that
Yes.
time.
But at this age, I am not ever. That's the cardinal rule of parenting is you can feel things outside of them, like, that you feel frustrated, but we're trying our best. Of course, it may slip that you get angry, but you are trying your best not to blame them or shame them for things that they're learning, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
my son goes through regressions or behavioral issues, and I'm like, okay, it's just one of those days. And
Yeah.
if you talk to a friend, talk to a partner, have some levity, but also just by doing that, you don't do that behavior, right? Because when I have someone to
Yeah.
create that outlet with, I'm less likely to be angry and reactive because I have a husband who's like laughs with me and say, well, you're not going to do that. And I'm like, obviously not, but it has like accountability for this rage that I've been raised with to not
Yeah.
come out because I was
Yeah.
raised with rage. Like it was what
Yeah.
I knew.
Same. Yeah.
And so now I have to tell myself like, you don't have to go back to these coping mechanisms that have been ingrained in you until you were
Mhm.
18 years old, but you can talk about it with your partner so that you don't do it. Right. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm not, but the part of you that's like, oh, I just want to
Yeah.
I
It's
just
a
want to
sense
pull
of
him or hit him.
release.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're like,
Yeah.
and then you're like, no, I'm not going to. I'm bigger than this. I'm growing
Yes, you
and
are.
I can tell my husband and we'll work through it together. And he won't report me to anybody because he knows that it's not anything more than just a thought, and that I don't do that,
Exactly. There was
But in any
nothing that
case,
was
it's like,
acted upon.
I think it's an important thing to share because I think it's also relatable because so many of my
Mhm.
families are like, there's no way. Like, I mean, sometimes I just want to scream. I'm like, listen, sometimes I want to scream. Sometimes I want to hit because that's what I knew. You got to learn how to undo that. And that takes time, but you can do it,
It does. Time, patience,
Yes.
persistency, consistency, pivoting when things don't
Yes.
work. All of that is
All things that
a
take time,
normal
but it's
part.
still,
Yes.
yeah. Oh
Yes, and it's
gosh.
still going to be hard no matter what.
Yeah.
Like I feel like we have gone through our own self-growth journeys and we continue to do so, and it's still hard. We still
Yeah.
we're human, we're not robots. What is, last question, Mona, what is your
Yeah.
personal mantra? What is your personal affirmation that keeps you motivated, both as a parent, as your beautiful children are growing and challenging you in different ways, and professionally, you are growing and making leaps and bounds in this space. What is something that you say to yourself that keeps you chugging forward?
I think knowing this before I say that, it's knowing who I was and the issues that I'm trying to overcome. And that's perfectionism, people
Yeah.
pleasing, and a need for control. Like those are the three things.
Thinking like a
Yes.
typical South Asian woman.
Typical South Asian physician. Okay. Like, I mean, perfectionism, people pleasing, and then a sense of control, right? And I mean, that's how we became who we are and we were raised in that. And so knowing that, it's a few things. It's knowing that I don't always have to get it right, which is really, really relieving. Like, I don't always have to know what to do. And that
Yeah.
the biggest one for me is know when I can ask for help or know when I need help and rely on the people that can help me to do that. Right. I think part of the control and perfectionism and is like, well, I do it best, but maybe my husband can do it and he may not do it as good as I will, but he'll do it.
But it's
My
done.
nanny's amazing. So I can't even, like, she does everything better than I do. Like, it's like amazing, like the things she cooks. And I'm like, God bless her. But like really just utilizing the help when I can, focusing on what I know and being open to what I don't know, because I don't have to be a perfectionist and this sort of, I know everything. And then also that I don't have to know what's coming, like this control feeling of like, it's okay to not be in the know and it's okay to just learn to go with the flow. And that to me has caused a lot of just amazing realization. And when I know that in the end, parenting isn't about perfection, it's about connection. That's what
Mhm.
really gets me going. So rather than always being, on cue, making the perfect meals, doing all this, sitting with my son and playing Uno with him at this age is the best moment of my day. When I
Yeah.
get to giggle with my daughter and dance, it gets me teary-eyed, and dance to,
I
like,
know.
she loves like the most hood rat songs out there. Like she's like
Yes.
Kendrick Lamar, and like she's like literally this girl is like dropping it low, and I'm like, listen, I'll come with you to the club when you're older. Like, we'll do it, girl.
Correct.
We'll
She
do
and
it.
Gia are going to be
And she
BFFs.
is literally like pushing her butt down, and I'm like, where did you see me do this? Like, what are you doing?
It's
But
in her
like
blood.
those moments of connection when I am busy and running around and I see their little eyes, and we do gratitude jars every night, like
Mhm.
where we go around and I ask Ryan what's he's grateful for, and my husband goes and I go, and then Ryan pretends to think what Vera's going to say and says it for her because she can't speak yet in full
So
phrases.
precious. Oh
But
my
when I
gosh.
hear that everything that my son is grateful for is a moment with either me or my husband or my nanny, it's not ever a thing. It's always a moment. It reminds me about how powerful that simple connection. Mommy, I loved going to Publix with you, which is our grocery store.
Yeah.
I mean, what do I need? And it's like we do stuff, but it's those moments that really matter in those small ways. And that is how you know you're doing a good job, when you are just giving them these moments. It's not about quantity, it's about quality, and it's about taking care of yourself so that you can better take care of your child. I go down to that because I'm in the best mental health I've had since I've become a mom, and it shows.
Yeah.
I'm not putting guilt or shame on any of parent out there, but when I was depressed with Ryan and I was, on like really depressed and suicidal, it affected my momming. And now I'm happy, meaning with life, I have ups and downs, but I feel content. I have a therapist. It's all privilege work to be able to have a therapist and the time to exercise and all of that. But I'm not going to look at it as something I'm not proud of, because it has allowed me to be a better mom. And I'm grateful for all of these things that I have. It's not like I'm like, well, everyone can do workouts and therapy. I understand the barriers, but I also will never be upset about having it because I wish it for everybody. Having the ability to exercise, the ability to have a therapist, the ability to have help is like, it's like you hit the jackpot. Like when you can have that as a mom, to be able to say, yeah, I can take time for self. I can fill my passion and fill my cup with things that make me happy, but I can also show up for my child in a better way. It's like such a beautiful thing.
Oh, Mona, thank you so much for sharing that. That was a
Yes.
beautiful way to end this. For anyone out there who isn't already following you, where can everyone find you?
So PedsDocTalk is the way to find me anywhere. So PedsDoctalk, Instagram, TikTok a little bit, but Instagram, TikTok. I'll be on Facebook soon. YouTube podcast is the PedsDocTalk podcast, and then the website PedsDocTalk.com. You can find all of my free content, resources, paid resources. All of it is there. I love doing this work, so I'm so happy that we could do this today, and people will learn about parenting and momming. And parenting is a joyful thing, so I'm happy
It
to talk
really
about it.
is. It really is. And your passion definitely seeps through everything that you do. Mona, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy woman, and the fact
As
that
are
you are
you.
taking
Yeah.
time out of your busy schedule to be here, I'm so grateful. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So happy to finally do this with you, Flora. Thank you.
Same. All right, Beyond listeners, that is it for Dr. Mona Amin at PedsDocTalk. You can find her where she mentioned. We will put all of her information, her Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, website on the podcast information page. I also want to hear from you. So don't forget to follow the Beyond podcast, subscribe to it. I want to hear reviews, the good, the bad, the ugly. DM me on Instagram. Any way you can get a hold of me, you know how. We want to hear your feedback, what you've learned, what you want to hear from, and hopefully we'll have Dr. Mona back later. We will see you
Yes.
guys in the next episode. Bye. Thank you so much for joining and spending your precious time here with me. As someone who prioritizes her energy, I am so grateful that you chose to spend yours here. To help me help you, please take an extra 30 seconds of your time to rate and review the podcast on your listening platform. For more tips and a behind-the-scenes look into my life, follow me on Instagram at Dr. Flora Sinha. That's Dr. Flora Sinha. Finally, connecting with you truly fills my cup. So DM me on Instagram, email me at florasinhamd@gmail.com, repost if you love this episode. I love hearing from you. I am so grateful for you and cannot wait to be back for the next episode. Bye.